everybody, it's me, Luna. Welcome back to Luna Ơi! And welcome to another collaboration with the International Magazine. The International Magazine is an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and anti-fascist magazine run by a global team of over 35 young communist leaders from more than 25 countries all over the world. Today's video is based on an article called The Imperialism and Fundamentalism Reservoirs in Afghanistan by Shayan Behrouz, a Central Committee member of the Solidarity Party of Afghanistan. In this article, Behrouz discusses the history of the left in Afghanistan from the 1960s to this day, focusing in particular on the ways in which imperialism and fundamentalism have been working together to exploit Afghan people and to eliminate every attempt at building a leftist movement in Afghanistan. This is just one of many highly informative articles that you can find in the International Magazine, featuring stories from around the world from an overtly communist perspective. A full subscription is just $2.50 per month or $25 per year. So if you find this information interesting, I highly encourage you to check it out and consider subscribing. There's a link right in the description. Now, get started. United States-led imperialism has a long-standing connection to religious fundamentalism abroad, especially in Western Asia and Northern Africa. It has long been established that stoking the flames of fundamentalism can stand as a bulwark against progressive nationalism and communism. The flames of fundamentalism have also been fanned by the imperial core and through war, which comes with the added benefit for the capitalist class of enriching military-industrial corporations of the imperial core. All the way back in 1949, U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower also wrote to a confidant expressing his desire to back King Saud in Saudi Arabia, stating,
"The king was a logical choice in this regard. He at least professed anti-communism, and he enjoyed on religious grounds a high standing among all Arab nations."
Around the same time, in January 1951, one of the founders of what would become the CIA, a man named William Eddy, wrote to General Robert McClure, who headed up psychological operations at the Pentagon.
"I still feel that our country could earn large dividends at a very small cost by encouraging a moral alliance with Islam against communism."
In 1963, the CIA supplied the Ba'athists, another fundamentalist faction in Iraq, with the names of Iraqi Communist Party members so that they could assassinate them. The CIA organized a coup known as Operation Ajax, which relied on the support of fundamentalist clergy, who could mobilize large numbers of people from Tehran slums against the secular nationalist resistance movement. In 1970s and 80s, a fundamentalist in Afghanistan named Zia-ul-Haq, who worked with the CIA, promised Ronald Reagan to help destroy communism from Vietnam to Eastern Europe. Zia-ul-Haq and other fundamentalists such as Muslim Brotherhood and the Afghan Ikhwanis, with the backing of the USA, have fought against communists even before the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1978, especially in Egypt and Afghanistan. These and other USA-backed fundamentalists also suppressed secular Arab leftists and progressive nationalists who were not even aligned with the USSR throughout the region. It is worth mentioning that during these struggles between communist and fundamentalist forces, communism was quite popular with the people of the Middle East. According to Shayan Behrouz, the author of the article that this video is based on, the rallies held by Afghan Maoists, as well as the pro-Soviet People's Democratic Parties of Afghanistan, would draw crowds of hundreds of thousands of people, while fundamentalists at that time could hardly gather less than 100 people. On April 28, 1978, the Soviet Union backed the April Revolution, also known as the Sour Coup, to push out the military dictator General Mohammad Daoud Khan, who had himself staged a coup just 5 years earlier in 1973. The USA saw the Soviet-backed coup as a golden opportunity to defeat its rival in the region, and also take revenge for the embarrassing defeat of US forces by Vietnamese communists in 1975. The CIA was already backing Afghan jihadists through Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, calling them freedom fighters. In an interview with the French magazine, Le Nouvel Observateur in 1998. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who served as President Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, stated,
According to the official version of history, CIA aid to the Mujahideen began in 1980. That is to say, after the Soviet Army invaded Afghanistan on December 24, 1979. But the reality, closely guarded until now, is completely otherwise. Indeed, it was July 3, 1979, that President Carter signed the first directive for secret aid for opponents of the pro-Soviet regime in Kabul. It is also true that every day I wrote a note to the president in which I explained to him that, in my opinion, this aid was going to induce a Soviet military intervention.
So, the USA knowingly backed fundamentalist extremists in Afghanistan with the apparent intent of spurring Soviet intervention in the region, which is a much different story from the narrative which is generally presented about the start of that conflict in Afghanistan. Working with the CIA and with support from Saudi Arabia, Pakistan's ISI trained Afghan jihadists and made Pakistan into a safe haven for fundamentalist terrorists from across the Middle East, including Osama bin Laden. The CIA worked directly to military train and religiously radicalize fundamentalist terrorists to fight in Afghanistan against communism. The CIA and Pakistan's ISI gave a free hand to Afghan fundamentalist parties to kill all leftists, including secular and progressive nationalist figures in Pakistan who had fled the broad Soviet Karzai regime's repression. In other words, the CIA was helping to kill not just Soviet-backed communists, but even leftists who opposed the Soviet Union. The only priority was eliminating any sort of progressive, secular, or socialist movement in favor of fundamentalist religious extremism in the region. Pakistan's ISI, backed by the CIA, even provided private prison facilities, as well as vehicles with special number plates, which prevented even Pakistani police from being able to stop or search them. Religious fundamentalists were also provided with military intelligence information, weapons, and money, including information which and resources to help these forces hunt down and kill female teachers in Afghanistan. These agencies even helped to coordinate a union of Afghan fundamentalists, known as the Joint Investigation Team, to bolster their strength in Afghanistan. This union led to a peace deal between two powerful fundamentalist leaders, Ashraf Ghani and Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. Hekmatyar was so violent that even the USA-backed imperialist organization Human Rights Watch condemned him. Patricia Gosman, Associate Asia Director of Human Rights Watch, wrote, Hekmatyar is also linked to serious human rights abuses, including the forced disappearance of political opponents and an underground prison in Pakistan where torture was routine. Bolstered by the U.S. military aid funneled through Pakistan in 1980s, Hekmatyar extended his reach to include targeted assassination of Afghan intellectuals in Pakistan and violent attacks on non-governmental organizations that ran education and health programs for Afghan women in refugee camps in Pakistan. Gulbuddin was just as ruthless and strongly backed by the USA. His organization, Heb-e-Islami, received the highest amount of funding and weaponry from the USA than any other Afghan fundamentalist party during the Cold War, receiving over $1 billion from the USA. Gulbuddin's forces assassinated some of Afghanistan's most prominent leftist and progressive nationalist leaders and activists, including Dr. Fiaz Ahmad, founding leader of Afghanistan Liberation Organization, Qayyum Rabah, leader of Liberation Organization of the People of Afghanistan, and many more. Sarah Bernard was a specialist for the imperialist think tank and propaganda outlet RAND Corporation, and also happened to be the wife of Zalmay Khalilzad, who served as a U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan, Iraq, and the United Nations. In 2004, Bernard was quoted as saying, "At first, everyone thought there was no way to beat the Soviets. So what we have to do is to throw the worst crazies at them that we can fight, and there was a lot of collateral damage. We knew exactly who these people were and what their organizations were like, and we didn't care. Then we allowed them to get rid of. Just kill all the moderate leaders. The reason we don't have moderate leaders in Afghanistan today is because we let the nuts kill them all. They killed the leftists, the moderates, the middle of the roaders. They were just eliminated during the 1980s and afterwards. So, with the collapse of the broad Soviet Afghan regime, the Afghanistan people were left with all these criminal fundamentalist parties. Once the Soviets were ousted from Afghanistan, the fundamentalist leaders started another civil war, this time fighting among themselves for domination over one another. In this civil war, which lasted from 1992 until 1996, fundamentalist forces committed the most heinous crimes, killing at least 80,000 civilians in the city of Kabul alone. During this civil war, Pakistan's ISI and the CIA began accommodating a different gang of fundamentalists known as Taliban. These fundamentalists were largely the same to the previous gangs which the imperialists supported, but with a few differences. The Taliban was composed of religious school students who had been gathering influence since the Cold War, and the CIA decided it was time for them to take over. All these love affairs between imperialists and fundamentalists are packed with irony. In December of 1997, the U.S. oil company Unoco hosted a Taliban delegation for a tour of the USA to help facilitate an oil pipeline deal worth $10 billion, which netted the Taliban regime more than $400 million in annual profits. Just a few months later, on 20 August 1998, U.S. government forces targeted some bases which were established by Taliban-backed Al-Qaeda forces, and then not long after came September 11. Again, on the one hand, the U.S. started airstrikes against the Taliban, killing many civilians. However, even as these airstrikes were ensuing, Steve Colt writes in his book Directorate S that Taliban special envoys such as Mullah Charlie Akhund were meeting CIA personnel in Pakistan or inside Afghanistan. On October 7, 2001, the United States government, along with its partners in crime NATO and other imperialist core countries, started to throw bombs on the Afghan people under the guise of bringing democracy, women's rights, and fighting terrorism. However, as expected from an imperialist country, the US government did not do that. Instead, it reinstalled the fundamentalist Northern Alliance, who have committed countless crimes. The USA has sugarcoated this puppet government as democratic figures, while the Northern Alliance quietly allowed Islamic fundamentalists run their religious schools to produce new terrorists, and allowed fanatical international Islamic organizations such as Hizb ut-Tahrir and Jamiat Islah to work openly in the country. The puppet government installed some women into government and parliamentary seats to showcase Afghan women's so-called freedom. But this was mostly a show to propagandize the USA's supposed liberation of Afghanistan. According to Cheyenne Berush, the USA-backed Afghan government was composed of war criminals, fundamentalists, warlords, gangsters, mafia, drug traffickers, and other corrupt figures who were placed in power as the latest measure in the decades-long cat-and-mouse game which the USA has played with fundamentalists in Afghanistan, which leads us to this year's tragic scenes, in which we saw Afghan people fleeing to the Kabul airport and falling from airplanes to escape the re-establishment of the Taliban. These images shocked the world and were compared by capitalist media with images of the US escaping from Vietnam. Yet, this was a false comparison. Here in Vietnam, a free nation defeated US imperialism, but there in Afghanistan, a bereaved nation was once again, ultimately, made victim of long-standing US imperialism. Let's not forget that the US was defeated in Afghanistan, but not by its lackeys in the Taliban. Ultimately, the US empire is crumbling due to rampant internal problems, including the popular movements within the US like Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter, countless inevitable economic crises, the complete failure to contain the COVID-19 pandemic, the rise of new powers in China and Russia, and various failures around the world. With any luck, this may be a sign that the USA empire is on the verge of coming to an end. However, we must keep in mind that the USA and its imperial partners haven't lost their interest in Afghanistan just yet. Joe Biden has announced his plans to continue with intervention in Afghanistan and the surrounding region. The USA has made it clear that it intends to stop China and Russia from influencing the region. Imperialists have always utilized fundamentalists to pave the path for their dirty and ominous policies in undeveloped countries, especially Islamic countries, in the guise of bringing democracy and human rights. I should note that this took place in Vietnam as well, as our dictator Ngô Đình Diệm was a fundamentalist Catholic and initially gained power and influence with the United States government through his connections with the Catholic Church, and even tried to start a fascistic Catholic fundamentalist political party a few years before he was backed in a coup which overtook South Vietnam. The history of the Afghan people, and especially Afghan leftists, is really a tragic story. This is a very sad tale of defeat, in which the entire secular, progressive, and socialist movement of an entire region was totally eliminated by both imperialism and fundamentalism working together. Shayan Berouz, the author of the article that this video was based on, did a tremendous job showing the true face of US imperialism in Afghanistan. As we know well in Vietnam, imperialist forces always sugarcoat and hide their true intentions of exploitation with beautiful buzzwords such as democracy, freedom, liberation. But, as history shows, imperialists don't care about any of those things. In the case of Afghanistan, all they care about is money, oil, and profit. The US claimed to fight against terrorism when, in fact, they have to create and strengthen those same terrorists for decades, just so they could get more money, and so those terrorists could be used by them to fight a proxy war against leftists. As a Vietnamese communist, born and living in Vietnam, I totally understand this horrible nature of capitalism and imperialism, and I can easily see through the curtain of lies and distortions coming from the imperial core. I'm not gonna lie. When I saw people, especially leftists, comparing pictures of Afghan people running away in Kabul airport to Saigon, Vietnam in 1975, I was pretty disappointed. Yes, the pictures might look superficially similar, but beneath the surface, they tell totally different stories. Here in Vietnam, the liberation of Saigon represented the victory of a free nation over US imperialism. We defeated the US Army and kicked them out of our country so we can have our own self-determination. The Vietnamese people, to this day, can proudly call ourselves a Marxist-Leninist nation following our own socialist path. Meanwhile, the recent fallen Afghanistan government was nothing more than a puppet to the USA, so weak and so unpopular that it collapsed the moment the USA abandoned them. Now, the previous puppets of the USA, the Taliban, have taken power, and the future of Afghanistan is still unknown. Everything that's been going on in Afghanistan is so tragic. I hope we all can look at their history and learn the lesson. Never trust the imperial core, especially when it promises to bring you freedom and democracy. I hope my comrades in Afghanistan will stay strong and stay safe. You must survive to fight another day. Don't lose hope, because communism will win. Thank you so much, Shayan Berouz, for writing this deeply moving article, and thank you so much for watching, everyone. I will bring you more videos like this in near future, so please stay tuned. But if you want to check out more stories like this from around the world right now, just go and subscribe to the International magazine. This month's issue has stories on religious extremism in Africa and the role of communists, communalism in anathema to democracy and progress, the October Revolution response to the national catastrophe in Russia. And there's a link in the description. That's all for now. See you next time. Bye-bye. Hi everyone, I just want to thank all my supporters on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and my comrades on camaraderie.co. You are the reason I can make these videos, so thank you so much. If you want to support this channel, see the links in the description, or you can click like or share the video, that helps a lot too. And if you aren't already, be sure to subscribe. Thank you so much and bye-bye.